The wind whispered through the ancient olive groves, carrying with it the scent of the sea and the faint aroma of rosemary. In the small coastal village of Valtoria, where the cliffs met the endless blue of the Mediterranean, a legend had long been passed down from generation to generation. They spoke of a love so deep, so unbreakable, that even time itself had failed to erase it. It was the tale of Isabella and Marco. Isabella was the daughter of the village herbalist. She knew the secrets of every leaf and petal, every root and stem. Her mother had taught her since childhood, guiding her hands as she learned to crush lavender for sleep, mint for digestion, and rosemary for remembrance. Among them all, she cherished rosemary the most. "For remembrance," she would say, weaving tiny sprigs into her auburn hair. Marco, the son of a fisherman, had loved her since they were children. He would bring her wildflowers after every voyage, tucking them into the pockets of her apron with a shy smile. The village often teased him for it, but he never wavered in his devotion. Their love was quiet but strong, built over years of stolen moments by the shore, whispered promises beneath the moonlight, and laughter shared in the village square. Marco would sit beside Isabella as she prepared herbal remedies, watching in admiration as her skilled fingers crushed leaves and measured powders with precision. "One day, I will build you a home by the sea," he had once said, brushing a stray curl from her face. She had only smiled and placed a sprig of rosemary in his pocket. "Then let it remind you to return," she had whispered. But fate is seldom kind to lovers in stories such as these. A war had come, calling upon all able-bodied men to defend their homeland. Marco was among the first to leave. The village held a farewell gathering, a somber affair marked by quiet prayers and sorrowful goodbyes. On the morning of his departure, Isabella had pressed a sprig of rosemary into his palm. "For remembrance," she whispered, her voice catching in the wind. He kissed her one last time, inhaling the familiar scent of her hair, and promised to return. The first year, letters came regularly, filled with hopeful words, dreams of returning home, and reminders of love. Marco wrote of distant lands, of long marches under scorching suns, of nights spent staring at the sky, thinking of her. But then, the letters stopped. News of the war was slow to reach Valtoria, and soon rumors spread that Marco had perished in battle. The sea was unkind to those who waited, and many urged Isabella to move on. "They do not return," they would tell her gently, but she refused to believe it. Every day she walked along the cliffs, staring at the horizon, waiting for the sails of his boat to return. She still wore rosemary in her hair and placed fresh sprigs in the window of her small cottage, believing in her heart that he would see them and find his way back. Seasons turned into years. The war had ended, and men returned home. But Marco was not among them. Though Isabella never spoke of despair, her once bright laughter grew softer. Her hands busied themselves more in the apothecary, and her auburn hair became streaked with silver. Yet still, she waited. The villagers watched with quiet sorrow, knowing that her heart belonged to a ghost. Then, one evening, as a storm raged over the village, a shadowy figure stumbled down the cobbled streets. His clothes were tattered, his beard unkempt, his face lined with hardship. Many in the village did not recognize him at first, but Isabella did. Her heart pounded as she ran to him, her trembling fingers touching his weary face. It was Marco, weakened but alive. He had spent years as a prisoner in a distant land, fighting every day to return home. He had survived on little more than memories and hope. In his hands, he carried only one thing, a dried, fragile sprig of rosemary, pressed between the pages of a worn letter. "I never forgot," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Isabella's tears mingled with the rain as she embraced him, as if to assure herself that he was real. The village bells rang out, announcing a love that had defied time and distance. That night, the storm passed, and a new day dawned over Valtoria. From that day on, every home in the village kept a sprig of rosemary by their door, not just for remembrance, but as a symbol of love that never fades. Isabella and Marco, their love stronger than time itself, finally built the home by the sea they had once dreamed of, where the scent of rosemary would forever dance in the salty breeze.